The wind howled like a wounded animal outside, rattling the branches against the windows of the old colonial house. But each night, as dusk bled into darkness, a strange silence overtook the place. Not the peaceful kind, more like the breath-holding stillness before scream. Clara's office was set up in the den, just off the hallway. Her laptop sat open on the desk, the screen still aglow with a half-written email to her publisher. She'd taken a break an hour ago to make tea, but hadn't returned since. Her writing had slowed lately, partly due to the emotional toll of the divorce, partly because she felt constantly watched. That evening, as she climbed the stairs to get ready for bed, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A new email notification. She stopped halfway up and glanced at the screen. Sent from Clara Matthews author at gmail.com to Natalie at wordsmithpublishing.com. Subject: draft submission sent. 9:43 p.m. Her blood turned to ice. That email, the one she hadn't finished, was sent. But she hadn't touched her laptop since making tea. It had sent itself. She climbed back down the stairs cautiously, barefoot on the creaking wood. The living room was dim, lit only by the ambient glow from the kitchen's under-cabinet lighting. The den was darker still. Her laptop screen had dimmed, but the small, pulsing light showed it was still on. She tapped the trackpad. The screen blinked to life. The email had been sent, along with a document attachment titled final_draft.docs. That file didn't exist. She never used all caps in file names. She opened the document. Empty. Blank. She stared at it, breath held tight in her lungs. Slowly, she clicked File and checked the recent history. The document had been created just minutes ago. A few seconds later, it had been saved. By her account. By her account, but not by her. Clara closed the laptop and backed away. Her hands trembled, and she could feel her heart pounding against her ribs like it wanted out. The house creaked again, an audible groan from the ceiling above. Upstairs, the same place where her old bedroom had been. The same place that, even as a child, she had never liked walking past at night. That room, Room 3, her mother used to call it, had been kept closed off for years. Her mother said it was full of storage, but Clara knew better. The door had a latch on the outside, from the hallway. The kind of latch you used to keep something in, not out. Something clicked. A rhythmic pattern. Soft. Mechanical. Typing. Faint typing. Her stomach dropped. Clara stood frozen in the hallway. There were no other electronic devices in the house. No other computers. No guests. No neighbors close enough to hear it. No one else here. And yet, someone was typing upstairs. She forced herself to move, reaching for her phone. She opened the audio recorder app and pressed record. Slowly, with deliberate steps, she crept up the stairs. Each footfall seemed impossibly loud, drowning out the faint but steady clack-clack of typing coming from room 3. The door was closed, as always. But now, something was different. Light glowed faintly beneath the doorframe, flickering as though from screen. Clara reached for the handle, cold to the touch. She braced herself, twisted it slowly, and pushed the door open. Silence. The typing stopped the moment the door creaked open. The room was empty. No computer, no desk, no lights. Just an old bed frame, some dusty shelves, and the stale smell of sealed air. She stepped inside cautiously. Then something moved behind her. A shadow, just a flicker, darted past the hallway behind her. She spun, heart lurching, but nothing was there. She stepped back into the hallway, closed the door behind her, and locked the latch, just as her mother used to do. That night, sleep didn't come. Clara lay awake, eyes locked on the hallway beyond her bedroom door. The sound never returned, but her phone, resting on the nightstand, vibrated once more. Another email. No subject, no body, just an attachment. Draft_v2.docs. The sender, Clara Matthews author at gmail.com. The receiver. Also her. She opened it with trembling fingers. This time there was text. Clara didn't sleep the rest of the night. She lay rigid under the covers, staring at the blinking light of her phone like it might spring to life again. The message was still open on the screen. 5 chilling words. Don't come back to room 3. No signature. No formatin. Just that plain, deliberate warning. She checked her Gmail activity log. Every email had been sent from her device, from her IP. It was like someone, or something, was using her identity from inside the house. At dawn, Clara finally got up, dizzy from exhaustion. She brewed coffee in silence, the kitchen filling with the sharp scent of roast and unease. She hadn't told anyone she'd come back to the house, not even her publisher. The house had no smart devices. No Alexa, no Smart TV, nothing that could be hacked, or so she thought. She opened her laptop again. The email was real. The file was still there. But when she opened it this time, the message had changed. I said, don't go back. All caps. A warning. An escalation. Clara slammed the laptop shut and stood, palms pressed to the table. She had to think clearly. Maybe she was overtired. Maybe this was a trauma response from the divorce, from a move, from being alone in a house full of old ghosts and childhood dread. But even as she tried to rationalize, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered what she didn't want to admit. This wasn't her imagination. She decided to leave for the morning, just to get out of the house and reset. She grabbed her coat and keys, stepped outside, and froze. There were footprints in the frost-covered grass. Bought footprints. Human. They circled the house and stopped right under her bedroom window, then vanished. No one should have been out there. Her house sat on 3 acres of private woodland. The road wasn't visible from her porch, and yet someone or something had been watching her, listening. She drove into town, straight to the public library, which thankfully still had computer terminals. There, she logged into her email, different network, different machine. The email was still there, but now another new message had arrived. From claramatthewsauthor@gmail.com to claramatthewsauthor@gmail.com subject. No, she looked under the bed, inside the closet, even pried at the baseboards. Nothing. No camera. No wires. No devices. But someone had been there, and they were still watching. The dread had grown thick by afternoon. Clara sat in her living room, lights on, doors locked, trying to write, trying to regain some normalcy. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Top. A single, soft sound came from upstairs. Top, top, top. It was unmistakable. The sound of typing. Her skin turned to ice. She reached for her phone and dialed 911, but stopped. What would she say? That her old bedroom, long sealed, was haunted by her own email account? That someone invisible was typing upstairs? No, she needed proof. With shaking hands, she opened her camera app and switched to video. Slowly, she moved toward the staircase. She could hear the typing now, clearer, rhythmic, steady. Someone was definitely using a keyboard, but she hadn't brought one upstairs. She crept up the steps, recording everything, her breaths short and shallow. The light under the door of room 3 flickered faintly again. Like a screen, the typing stopped. She reached for the handle, then paused. This time she knocked. Silence. Then a return knock. 3 slow taps from the other side. Clara stumbled backward, phone still recording. She ran back downstairs and locked herself in the kitchen. She uploaded the video to her cloud storage, just in case, and replayed it. The typing was there. The knock, too. It wasn't in her head. She had proof now. Her phone buzzed again. New email. From claramatthewsauthor@gmail.com subject. You wanted TO, right, didn't you? Attachment. Final chapter. Doc. She opened it. Inside was a single paragraph. She thought she was alone. But she was never alone. Not since she returned. And by the time she realized what lived in room 3, it was already writing through her hands. Below it, a second paragraph had appeared in real time. She wasn't touching the keyboard, but the words were typing themselves into the document. She stared in paralyzed horror. She opened the kitchen drawer. She took out the knife. She turned to the hallway. Clara shoved the laptop away. She hadn't opened the drawer. She hadn't moved, but the document knew what she was about to do, or what it wanted her to do. The typing stopped. Then a third paragraph appeared. She looked up. He was standing in the hallway. Clara's head snapped toward the dark hallway beyond the kitchen. Nothing. She stood up, breathless, every muscle on edge. Then the floor creaked. Someone or something was there. She wasn't alone. Clara gripped the edge of the kitchen table, her eyes locked on the hallway that led to the front of the house. Her chest rose and fell in tight, panicked breaths. The words still glowed from her laptop screen like a taunt. She looked up. He was standing in the hallway. But when she looked, the hallway was empty. Or at least, it seemed to be. The air felt different now. Heavy. Thick. It was as if the house was holding its breath, waiting. Her phone buzzed again. She nearly dropped it. A new message. No email this time. A notification from a voice recorder app she hadn't opened in months. Recording saved. Upstairs, tipping Uncle Matthews. For 1 minute ago, she hadn't recorded anything. She hadn't even touched the app. But the title matched what she'd heard. Her heart pounded as she pressed play. The audio was faint, scratchy. For the first few seconds, there was only ambient noise, the creaking of the house, the ticking of the wall clock. Then it came, the sound of keys tapping. Soft, deliberate, unmistakable. Typing. And then, buried deep under the static, another sound. A low whisper. Garbled at first, then clearer. "Let me out." Clara dropped the phone. The voice wasn't hers. It was male, hushed, pleading, somewhere between a whisper and a breath. She stared down at the device like it might burn her. It had recorded itself. The house had recorded it. There was someone in the house with her. She needed help. She called Rachel, her best friend from college, the only person who wouldn't laugh her out of the room for saying, "My house is typing messages to me." The phone rang once. Twice. "Hello. Rachel, thank God. Can you come over?" "What's wrong?" I think someone's in the house. But not like a person. It's weird. I think it's using my computer." A pause. Then, "You sound off. Clara, are you sure you're okay?" "I'm not hallucinating, Rachel. I swear. Please, just come by. You'll see for yourself." Rachel sighed on the other end. "All right. I'm on my way. Don't do anything stupid." Clara hung up and slumped into the couch, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She just had to wait. But the house didn't like waiting. As soon as she put her phone down, the typing started again, fast and urgent this time. It wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from the living room. Clara turned slowly. Her desktop monitor, which she hadn't turned on all week, was glowing. The cursor was moving across a blank Word document. Characters appeared rapidly, as though an unseen typist were working furiously. She crept toward it, swallowing the rising panic. "You invited her. She shouldn't come. She won't leave." Then, as if in real time, "She's at the gate." Clara rushed to the window. Her driveway wound through dense trees, but she could see headlights cutting through the mist. Rachel's car. She ran to the front door, flung it open. "Rachel!" Her friend stepped out of the vehicle, looking confused but concerned. Clara waved her over and hurried her inside. As the door closed behind them, the house seemed to shift, like the tension in the walls deepened, adjusted to the new presence. Rachel took off her coat and looked around. "Okay, this place is way creepier than I remember." Clara laughed shakily. "Yeah, it's gotten worse." They moved to the living room. The computer screen was blank now. The typing had stopped. "I swear it was just—" Rachel raised a hand. No, I believe you. Just explain it from the beginning." Clara did. The emails, the messages, the photos, the sound recordings. She showed Rachel everything. The messages she hadn't typed, the paragraphs that predicted her actions. Rachel went pale as she listened. "This is insane," she whispered. "Like haunted AI?" Clara nodded slowly. "I don't know what it is, but it's in here. It watches. It knows." Rachel stood up and walked to the base of the stairs. "And you said all of this started with room 3? Clara's stomach dropped. "Don't go up there." Rachel turned. "We need to know what's in there." "I tried. I couldn't open it. It's like it doesn't want me to see." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "Maybe it doesn't know me." Before Clara could stop her, Rachel climbed the stairs. Clara followed, heart pounding. They stood before the door to room 3. It looked the same as always. White paint chipped, brass doorknob slightly rusted, a faint smell of old paper and dust seeping from underneath. Rachel reached out and twisted the handle. It turned. The door opened. Clara blinked. It's never opened before. The room was dim, lit only by the pale gray of afternoon. Dust particles floated through the air like tiny ghosts. A desk sat in the corner, covered in an old cloth. A chair, a mirror, nothing else. Rachel stepped inside, frowning. Doesn't look haunted. Clara hovered at the threshold. Something inside her resisted, deep in her bones, a primal warning. Don't go in. Don't. Rachel pulled the cloth from the desk. Underneath was an ancient typewriter. Not a computer, not a keyboard. An actual, analog, ink-ribbon typewriter. Rachel touched one of the keys. It clacked once, loudly, echoing in the room like a gunshot. Then the mirror on the wall flickered. It wasn't her reflection that stared back. It was Clara, alone, standing inside room 3. But in the mirror, Rachel was gone. What the? Rachel turned to Clara. Do you see that? Clara nodded, her voice caught in her throat. The mirror was showing a different version of the room. Rachel reached toward it. The typewriter clacked again, on its own this time. One letter, then another, then more. A full sentence emerged, slowly typed by invisible hands. The story has begun. Rachel stepped back. The room grew cold. The door slammed shut between them. Clara. Rachel's voice was muffled behind the door. Clara screamed and grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't turn. She beat on the door. Rachel, open it. Inside, the sound of the typewriter echoed again. Faster now. The keys pounding in a chaotic rhythm. Then silence. Clara pulled out her phone to call Rachel. No signal. She tried the house line. Dead. Then her phone lit up. Another email. From claramatthewsauthor@gmail.com to claramatthewsauthor@gmail.com. Subject. Chapter 4. She shouldn't have come nobody. No attachment. Just the subject line. Her blood ran cold. Clara ran to the basement, searching for the breaker box. Anything to force the house offline, to kill the power, to do something. But the switches were all working. Nothing seemed out of place. She ran back upstairs, heart in her throat, and flung the door open. It opened easily now. The room was empty. No typewriter. No mirror. No Rachel. Only her phone remained, lying on the floor, screen cracked, flickering between static and a single phrase in a Word document. Now she is part of the story. Clara stood frozen at the threshold of room 3, unable to breathe, unable to blink. Rachel's phone lay inches from her feet, its cracked screen buzzing and flickering faintly like the last signal from a sinking ship. The message remained on screen. Now she is part of the story. She picked it up with trembling fingers. The second she touched it, the screen went dark. Dead. No buttons worked. No restart. The device felt cold in her hand, unnaturally so. She backed away from the door, her mind a whirl of static. The house was silent again. Too silent. No wind, no humming appliances, no creaks in walls. Just an oppressive quiet that wrapped around her like cotton soaked in ice water. She staggered down the stairs, Rachel's phone still clutched in her hand, her own thoughts racing for logic, explanation, anything that would ground this into reality. But there was no rationale, no science, just the sense that something ancient and unseen had been awoken, and it had noticed her. And worse, it had taken Rachel. But taken her where? She picked up her own phone again, even though the last message had stopped her in her tracks. Another email notification glowed at the top. Subject, Chapter 5, Regret tastes like ink. The email had a single image attached, a photo of Clara standing in front of room 3. But it had been taken from inside the room, behind her. She hadn't heard a shudder. She hadn't seen a flash. Her hand shook as she scrolled down. At the bottom of the email was a button that said, Continue writing? She didn't dare press it. But before she could even make a choice, the cursor on her desktop began blinking on its own again, accompanied by a small chime, the sound Microsoft Word makes when a document autosaves. The typing resumed. She ran into the living room to see the new message forming. You have 1 hour to finish the story, or the ending writes itself. Suddenly, the printer behind her hummed to life. She jumped, spinning around as paper fed itself through, printing pages of something she hadn't written. The first page simply read, The house remembers everything. She pulled out the stack as they came. 10, 20, 30 pages. each one formatted like a manuscript. Clara's name in the author line, but she hadn't written a word. Except, she thumbed through a few. Her breath caught. They were her words, snippets from stories she'd written years ago and never published. Dialogues, descriptions, fragments of nightmares she'd typed and forgotten, all now printed, rearranged, repurposed, woven into this new story, this house's story, as if it were using her own creations to trap her. She dropped the pages. In the hallway, she heard the soft sound of typing again. But this time, it wasn't mechanical. It wasn't from her devices. It was the sound of human fingers on keys. Deliberate, hesitant, typing in real time. Upstairs, back in room 3. She didn't want to go back. But if Rachel was somehow still there, still alive, she had no choice. Clara grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and climbed the stairs, one creaking step at a time. As she neared room 3, she saw the door was half open now, just slightly ajar. Inside, the desk and typewriter had returned. Only this time, someone was sitting at the desk, typing. Her heart nearly stopped. The figure was facing away. Pale skin, long, dark hair cascading down a tattered shirt. Their fingers moved methodically across the keys. She stepped into the room, her voice barely a whisper. "Rachel." The figure didn't turn, but the typing stopped. Then slowly it stood. Clara's legs locked in place. Every muscle screamed at her to run. The figure turned. It wasn't Rachel. It wasn't anyone Clara recognized. Its face was featureless, smooth like melted wax. No eyes, no mouth. Just a blank canvas where a human expression should be. And yet it moved with precision, with purpose. It raised its hand and pointed to the mirror. Clara turned toward it and saw herself, typing. She wasn't in room 3 anymore. She was at her desk, in the living room, her fingers racing across her laptop keyboard, tears in her eyes. She was watching herself from another reality, from some other reflection. Suddenly, the mirror began to crack. First a hairline fracture, then a spiderweb. Then, in a single shattering explosion, it burst into glittering shards. The room went black. Clara screamed and found herself back in the living room, sitting at her desk, hands hovering over the keys. The document opened. Only one line on the screen. She sat down. She wrote. She bled. Her hands began typing on their own. She tried to pull away, but they wouldn't stop. It was like her muscles were being puppeted by invisible strings. Her fingers ached, her wrists screamed, but the words kept coming. It wasn't a story anymore. It was a confession. The document read. She knew the house was haunted. She knew something lived there, and she stayed anyway. Because deep down, she didn't want to be alone. Not really. She wanted to feel something again, even if it was terror, even if it meant being consumed. She wanted to matter, to be remembered. Clara sobbed. No, this isn't true. But her fingers kept typing. She brought others into the story. She dragged them in, not out of malice, but out of loneliness. She needed an audience. And now, the house had won. She stood abruptly, wrenching herself from the desk, stumbling backwards. But the screen continued to fill with words. Lines and lines, flowing by themselves. The printer began again, page after page. In the corner of the room, her old bookshelf toppled over on its own, scattering stories, drafts, journals, everything she'd ever written. The pages fluttered like birds trying to escape, but they all landed in a perfect circle around her feet. The lights flickered. The house groaned. The walls whispered. Finish it. A chorus of voices, familiar and strange, echoed from every corner. Finish it, Clara screamed, covering her ears, running into the hallway. But the front door was gone. Not locked. Gone. Just more wall where it used to be. She backed into the center of the living room, breath ragged, and looked up. A shadow passed across the ceiling. Slow, deliberate, like something was crawling above the plaster, watching her through it. She whispered, "What do you want?" And the answer came, not from the walls, not from the mirror, from inside her own mind. To be remembered. End of part 4. Let me know when you're ready for part 5. You said, "Give me part 5." ChatGPT said, "Here is part 5. Approximate 2,000 words of your horror story." She was alone in the house. But someone was typing upstairs. Laptop computer footprints. Clara stood alone in the center of her living room, her breath catching in her throat. The air had thickened somehow, heavy like a damp curtain pressing down. The front door had vanished. Her bookshelf lay broken, its pages encircling her feet like a paper grave. The printer had stopped, but the document on her screen was still growing, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. She wanted to scream, but what would be the point? She knew the house wouldn't let her go until she did what it wanted. Finish it, the walls had said. But what if finishing it only made things worse? Her eyes drifted to the staircase. The hallway was darker now, and above it, room 3 waited like a lung, inhaling slowly, preparing to breathe her in. She turned to the computer, watching as new words wrote themselves. One more chapter. Then it ends. Or she does. The screen flashed. Her hands moved again, pulled like marionettes by invisible strings. She climbed the stairs, knowing what waited, knowing the story was almost done. She couldn't resist the narrative anymore. Something inside the house wasn't just telling a story, it was living through it, feeding on it. It had tasted her memories, her fiction, her fear, and it wanted more. Clara grabbed the flashlight, its beam flickering from drained batteries, and stepped back toward the stairs. They groaned with each step like vertebrae shifting under her weight. At the top, room 3's door was wide open. No typewriter. No figure. Just the bare desk again, and the mirror. Except the mirror didn't show her reflection. It showed Rachel. But she didn't look like herself. Her eyes were wide, hollow, her lips moving silently as though repeating words she didn't understand. Her hands were pressed against glass, but it was from the inside. Rachel, Clara whispered. The moment she said her name, the mirror flashed white, and the image changed. Now, Clara saw a younger version of herself, typing alone in a bedroom, years ago. Her face exhausted, pages scattered on the floor. She remembered that night. It was when she first started writing horror stories seriously. The night her first real nightmare came through her fingers. The one about the girl trapped inside her own story. She called it Glass House, a story she'd written and never finished. She had abandoned it, and now it had come to life. The house was the unfinished story. It had filled in the missing pages with her own fears, her forgotten ideas, her discarded characters, everything she'd left unresolved. And it wanted closure. The mirror shimmered again and now showed the living room downstairs. Her own body stood there, motionless, lifeless, as if waiting. But how could she be in 2 places at once? Unless she wasn't really here anymore. A cold wind rushed past her. She spun around, and the door to room 3 slammed shut. Panic flooded her chest. She rushed to it, twisting the knob. Locked. She pounded. "Let me out." No answer. Then, the typewriter appeared again. Same place. Same desk. But this time, a sheet of paper was already loaded. She stepped slowly to it. One line had been typed. "You wrote this place into existence. Now write your way out." Her throat tightened. If the house was made of story, maybe she could unravel it. She sat down. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and for the first time, she typed by her own will. The door opens. The hallway returns. The story loosens its grip. Nothing happened. She typed faster. The friend reappears, shaken but alive. The mirror breaks for good. The house forgets. Still nothing. The paper remained unchanged. Then, a second line appeared beneath hers. Lies weakened the narrative. She stared, realizing her mistake. She couldn't write her way out by changing the story. She had to write the truth, even if it hurt, even if it meant confronting what she'd buried. She lowered her head and began again. Clara was not alone because of the house. She was alone because she abandoned everyone who tried to get close. Writing had become her shield, her excuse. Every story was a wall she built higher around herself. Rachel was her only friend left, and Clara brought her here because she knew this place would keep Rachel from leaving, just like all the others. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept going. She thought stories could save her. But the truth was, she had always known how this one ended. A deep groan echoed from beneath the floorboards. The desk shook. The paper tore itself free of the typewriter, folding midair before landing at Clara's feet. Then, the door clicked open. Room 3 released her. She stepped out, her legs weak, her heart pounding. The hallway stretched longer than before, shadows swaying along the wallpaper. At the far end stood Rachel, her face pale but human. Her eyes locked on Clara's. "I tried to follow you," Rachel said quietly. "But something kept me here." Clara nodded, trembling. "It wanted me to finish. I think it needed a truth, not a story." Rachel looked down the hallway. "Can we go now?" "I hope so," Clara whispered. They turned together toward the stairs. And this time, the living room greeted them like nothing had changed. Bookshelf intact, printer silent, front door back in place. Clara reached for the handle, but the mirror by the door caught her eye. It showed both of them, Rachel and Clara, standing there, alive, real, and behind them, nothing, just an empty hallway. Clara opened the door. Outside, the wind was warm, the night quiet. They stepped out, closing the door gently behind them. But as Clara turned to walk away, her phone buzzed. A final notification. From unknown at mirrorwords.ai subject. The end? Message. You finished your story, but we haven't finished ours. Attached was a photo. Room 3. Still waiting. Clara didn't sleep that night. Not really. She and Rachel checked into a motel 20 minutes away from the house, but the bed felt too soft, the walls too quiet. The message. We haven't finished ours. Rachel drifted off somewhere around 3 a.m., but Clara stayed up, scrolling back through her inbox. The strange email, the one from mirrorwords.ai, was gone. No trace. She checked the trash, the spam folder. Nothing. She stared at her laptop screen, trying to will something else to appear. But it remained blank, boring, comfortingly normal. Yet something itched in her thoughts, a static just beneath the surface of her mind, as if the story was still writing itself, somewhere. When morning came, Clara felt detached from her body, like she was watching herself in a dream. She and Rachel didn't speak much as they ate breakfast in silence. Rachel kept tapping her phone nervously, avoiding eye contact. "I think," Clara finally said, "we need to go back." Rachel blinked. "Back? Are you insane?" "No. I think it's unfinished. The house. It doesn't just exist to scare people. It traps what we leave unresolved." Rachel laughed bitterly. "I think you've given that place enough of your mind, Clara." Clara nodded, understanding. But something inside her had already decided. Later that afternoon, she returned, alone. The house on Ashbrook Lane looked just as it had. Still, empty, ordinary, like it hadn't swallowed her whole just days earlier. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately. No dust, no signs of decay. Everything perfectly preserved, like the house had been waiting in a frozen moment. She made her way up to room 3. The door was already open. Inside, the desk, the typewriter, and a single new page. She approached it carefully, every part of her screaming to run. Clara Langford, author. That was all it said. Then, below it, new lines began appearing. There's only one ending. The one you refuse to write. The one where the story isn't about haunted houses or echoes in hallways. It's about you and what you did. Clara felt a wave of nausea. She remembered why she stopped writing horror years ago. Not just because her ideas had gone dry, but because her stories had started to predict things. Real things. She'd written about fires before they happened. Accidents before they struck. Faces she'd never seen would show up in her stories, and then show up on the news. She buried those stories deep in forgotten folders, hoping ignoring them would make the pattern stop. But the house had remembered. The typewriter clacked again. "You wrote about Rachel years ago, before you even met her." Clara staggered back. No, she hadn't. She couldn't have. But the character in Glass House, the girl trapped inside a mirror. She'd called her Ray. It hadn't meant anything back then. Just a name, right? She opened her laptop, searched her old drafts, found the original Glass House manuscript from 6 years ago. There it was. Ray. Blonde. Quick-tempered. Always looking for the exits. It was Rachel. She'd written her into existence. Or maybe the story had known her first and just waited for Clara to catch up. The house hadn't been feeding on fiction. It had been using her as the pen. She typed slowly on the typewriter, her fingers trembling. What are you? The answer came instantly. We are narrative. Pattern. Memory that won't die. You are the narrator. And now, the protagonist. The room shook. The mirror on the wall flickered like static. Then, Rachel's voice. From inside the mirror. Clara? What are you doing? Clara turned. Her friend's face stared back, pressed to the glass. I didn't come back with you, Rachel whispered. But I woke up back here. Something pulled me in. Clara's breath hitched. It's trying to end the story, but only if we both finish it. Rachel looked terrified. What do we do? Clara looked back at the typewriter. Her own reflection behind her now smiled. Not in fear, but in hunger. She knew what it wanted. A final line. A closing. Resolution. She could give it one of two things. A sacrifice or the truth. Clara turned back to Rachel. I'm sorry. This started with me. I'll end it. She sat down and began typing. Not fiction. Not lies. The real truth. She had been a lonely child. She made up stories to survive. First to make sense of her parents' divorce, then to cope with the loneliness that followed. Her characters were always echoes of real people. But eventually, she stopped recognizing where her imagination ended and the world began. She met Rachel in college, or thought she did. But maybe the house had written Rachel into her life long before. She didn't know anymore. What she knew was this. Their story wasn't meant to be consumed. It was meant to be released. The typewriter stopped. The room dimmed. The mirror shattered. Rachel collapsed onto the floor beside her, gasping. They were both here now. Real. Alive. Clara looked at the final page. It had only 2 more words, the end. The house moaned softly, almost like a sigh of relief. And then, everything faded. The hallway disappeared. The walls peeled away, and the front door stood open. Bright daylight poured in. Weeks passed. Clara moved out of town. She started therapy, put her writing on hold. Rachel checked in every day like clockwork. Their friendship was scarred but intact, held together by the strange intimacy of shared trauma. But one night, Clara received another email. No address. No sender. Only a subject line.